In the first episode of Chainsaw Man, Denji is offered 100 yen to eat a cigarette, to which he gleefully accepts. Although he initially appears to comply, Denji cleverly pretends to eat the cigarette, but then discreetly throws it away when the others aren't looking. This clever ruse, at first glance, brilliantly introduces us to Denji, who is not just straightforward and naive, but also possesses a shrewd sense of survival, capable of navigating his brutal world with cunning guile. But here lies a fundamental disconnect, a narrative thread that intriguingly unravels as the season progresses. This initial portrayal of Denji as somewhat cunning is, in my view, a misrepresentation of his character as it evolves throughout the show. Aside from a fleeting glimpse in the climactic final battle, Denji predominantly emerges as a bold, impulsive force of destruction, often acting without foresight or strategy. So I introduce him with a trait that is scarcely revisited. This early scene, one of our first windows into Denji's world, seems to bear significant weight, yet paradoxically remains an isolated instance in his character arc. Could this scene be a misrepresentation by the anime's creators, or is it an intentional, albeit isolated, attempt at adding depth to Denji's character? All I know for sure is that Denji sucks and that Chainsaw Man's lame. Here's why. As someone who's not deeply immersed into anime, my journey into Chainsaw Man was sparked by sheer curiosity, fueled by its growing popularity. It's important to note this outsider perspective of mine, as it might colour my analysis differently from those who are veterans in anime viewership. But in my opinion, a fresh set of eyes can offer a new dimension to the discourse. Chainsaw Man, despite the buzz, didn't quite hit the mark for me. It's not that it's a disaster of a show, but it doesn't rise to the occasion of being particularly captivating. My time with these 12 episodes felt unexpectedly lackluster, and I attribute that mainly to the show's writing. The characters, rather than being multi-dimensional beings, often come across as disappointingly flat. So take Denji, our protagonist for instance. My previous criticism of his misleading introduction isn't just a minor quibble, it's emblematic of a larger issue at play: the squandered potential of his character. Imagining this character who literally transforms into a chainsaw, a living embodiment of destruction, I was excited to see him perform dynamically, especially considering the glimmers of slyness that we initially see. But instead, Denji often falls into a monotonous pattern, lacking the depth and complexity that could have made him a standout character. The most obvious example of this is his pattern of behavior in battles, a glaring testament to his character's lack of depth. Time and again, we witness Denji leaping into the fray without a hint of strategy or foresight, a recurring theme that becomes almost predictably monotonous. Case in point, the encounter with the zombie devil. Here, Denji faces an adversary capable of reanimating the dead, yet his approach? Sheer, unadulterated, brute force. No plan, no tactics, just chainsaws blazing. Though I can understand this one being excused. It's the first time we see these abilities, so turning it into a flashy and explosive, unthinking scene of beautiful animated gore is, in all honesty, fine, even if it is an early indicator of his one-track mindset. Then there's the showdown with the Bat Devil, which I'm less forgiving towards. This is a creature with the advantage of flight and long-range attacks, so you'd expect for Denji to be forced to adapt, as his chainsaw isn't well suited for the task. But no. He charges in, chainsaws roaring, ignoring any semblance of strategy. It's a pattern that's becoming unmistakably clear. The next big fight, in my opinion, is the worst offender, the encounter with the Eternity Devil, a narrative arc that, in my view, epitomizes the underwhelming execution of Chainsaw Man. Our characters are trapped in a hotel, ensnared in a psychological and physical battle against a devil that embodies the concept of eternity. The stakes? Astronomically high. The tension? Palpable. The setup? Ripe with potential for a complex and thrilling resolution. The narrative spends a significant amount of time building up this scenario, and to be honest, it does it very well. We're talking about a situation where the characters are grappling with the very real possibility of being trapped in this nightmarish loop forever. The claustrophobic setting of the hotel amplifies this sense of dread and desperation. There are moments where sacrifices seem imminent, where characters teeter on the brink of grave decisions. I mean, they even start to consider the Eternity Devil's offer to kill Denji in exchange for their freedom. Kabeni literally attempting to murder the MC. Look at that, she's trying to murder him there. Isn't that great? I finally got my green screen to work. Alongside Aki, who was seriously contemplating using that self-sacrificing sword that he has. It's a moment that's almost reliant on a significant sacrifice. One that could alter the course of the narrative and delve deep into the themes of moral ambiguity and desperation. This scenario could have been a profound exploration of the characters' limits and how far they'd go just for survival. The air is unbearably thick with anticipation. Viewers are sat there awaiting a climax that's equally as satisfying and rewarding. The resolution, however, well, I'm sure you're all aware. It's disappointingly simple, to say the least. Denji, in his typical fashion, decides to attack the Eternity Devil head on, with no strategic nuance or clever twist. It's just an endless barrage of attacks. A physical onslaught that's as straightforward as it is anticlimactic. This lack of a clever or nuanced solution feels like a right letdown, especially considering the 2-episode build-up and the stakes involved. This scenario, in my opinion, is a microcosm for Chainsaw Man as a whole. The show often sets up intriguing premises, creating expectations for something intriguing and creative. Yet, more often than not, these setups culminate in resolutions that are so straightforward to the point of being mundane. It's a pattern that unfortunately becomes increasingly evident as the show progresses further. High stakes and intense build-ups leading to scenarios that just lack depth and complexity. Whilst yes, I am aware that Denji drinking the devil's blood could be seen as some sort of a plan, I just think it would be disingenuous to claim that this is nuanced or meticulous enough to be considered anything more than reckless. This repetitive formula contributes significantly to the show's overall sense of monotony. Instead of being a roller coaster of surprises and plot development, Chainsaw Man often settles into a predictable rhythm. The result is a narrative that, despite its admittedly visually striking animation, I mean, it is gorgeous, and it certainly has a unique premise, but it struggles to maintain engagement and fails to capitalize on this potential for depth and innovation. In essence, the Eternity Devil arc, with its unremarkable resolution, is a fitting metaphor for the series itself. A journey that promises much, but while not devoid of entertainment, offers an experience that is fundamentally just a bit, and here's my favorite reviewer word of the day, flaccid. Falling short of the compelling storytelling and character development that one might expect from a show with such an interesting premise. Amidst this pattern of lackluster and straightforward resolutions, the battle against Katana Man fortunately stands out as a notable and great exception. This confrontation presents a rare instance where Denji's usual tactic doesn't work. His normal strategy of a head-on, unthinking, impulsive attack falters. It's a pivotal moment that momentarily breaks the monotony of this character's approach. In their initial encounter, Denji's typical brute force method proves ineffective against the Katana Man's skill and agility. This failure marks a significant moment in the series, as it forces Denji to reassess and adapt, a rare display of him using his head in combat. The rematch with the Katana Man showcases a different side of Denji. Here, he cleverly utilizes the chainsaw with his leg, a tactical move that catches his enemy off guard and secures the victory. This moment of ingenuity is a refreshing change, demonstrating that Denji has the potential for strategic thinking when pushed to his limits. However, it is important to note that this example, whilst yes a pleasant divergence, doesn't fully redeem Denji as a character. It's merely a fleeting glimpse of what could have been, in my opinion. A hint at a more complex and strategic protagonist. This singular moment of cleverness stands as a stark contrast from the rest of the series, where such depth in Denji's character is largely absent. It's just a case of too little too late. While it's certainly encouraging to see this aspect of Denji, the overall narrative just fails to capitalize on these moments. This Katana Man battle, therefore, serves as a bittersweet reminder. It shows that Chainsaw Man has the capabilities for more nuanced character development and strategic battles, yet it also highlights what truly befuzzles me about this series, which is its reluctance to explore these themes in greater depth. This rare instance of Denji's tactical thinking is a glimmer of light in an otherwise predictable and straightforward narrative, offering a glimpse into a path less traveled, where characters are allowed to evolve and surprise us. Unfortunately, such moments are sparse, to say the least, leaving the audience to only wonder what might have been if character development like this was truly allowed to prosper and blossom in ways that are similar to this one, and complexity had been more of a consistent feature in the show. This unthinking aggression not only makes Denji's battles predictable, but also greatly undermines his character development, in my opinion. Where there could have been layers, we find a flat surface. Where there could have been evolution, we find stagnation. And that, my habibis, is a missed opportunity of epic proportions. So when we circle back to that clever cigarette scene in episode 1, it's not just a quirky moment. It's a stark contrast from the Denji that we come to know. A character who, instead of growing more complex and intriguing, becomes a typical unidimensional force of mass destruction. A character who simply had the potential to be so much more. This misstep is particularly glaring because of the contrast that it could have presented. Denji, the human, showing flecks of craftiness, juxtaposed with his chainsaw form, an unbridled force of havoc. This could have been a really compelling duality. It's a missed opportunity to explore a character who's more than just a one-note instrument of chaos. The groundwork was there, the potential for a rich, layered character was evident, but the execution didn't deliver, leaving leaving us with a protagonist who, unfortunately, becomes one of the least engaging parts of the show. I'm not even joking when I say that tiny, insignificant Siggy scene is what inspired me to write this entire video. It just irked me so much that they unknowingly misrepresented their main character so early into the series. And the worst part is, I'm not even done. Those are just my issues with Denji in the battle scenes, which, need I remind you, only take up a small proportion of the show. Now, I'd like to talk about his dullness outside of the fight. This is actually fairly difficult water to tread on, as I find that many of Chainsaw Man's biggest defenders see Denji's character as a genius usage of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
People think that Denji is a bad main character in Chainsaw Man because he apparently has bland goals. It's almost as if they watch with their eyes closed. I assume it's easy to know by now that Denji came from a setting of poverty, so for him, he doesn't even know the things he wants or the things that exist aside from basic needs. Denji's journey as a main character is literally from the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the needs are physiological, whereas others usually start around the middle.
Did you know that Denji's character progression in Chainsaw Man is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Denji's character progression is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
This next theory is one that Chainsaw Man demonstrates perfectly. Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Finally, my AQA psychology GCSE is coming in handy. At first glance, Denji's desires seem straightforward, almost primal. He yearns for life's most basic comforts, what many would consider to be intrinsic human rights, like food, a roof over his head, or more superficially, the affection of women. Considering this, I understand why it's totally relevant to bring up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I won't explain what it is for too long, as it is a rather entry-level bit of knowledge for anyone who knows anything about psychology. It genuinely may have been the first thing that we covered at A-levels, but briefly, for those unfamiliar, here's a quick rundown. Maslow's hierarchy is typically represented as a pyramid, my favorite 3D shape. At the base are fundamental physiological needs like food and shelter, followed by safety needs. As we move up, there are psychological needs like belonging and love, then there are esteem needs, and at the very top is self-actualization, the fulfillment of one's potential. Although this was later subdivided into transcendence, but we don't need to get into that for Chainsaw Man, especially considering much of what Denji's defenders cite is at the very bottom of the pyramid. I'm also aware that aesthetics and cognition hold places in the more elaborated pyramid, but for this video we're just going to focus on the starting 5. In Denji's case, his motivations at the start predominantly linger at the physiological base of this pyramid. It's a survivalist perspective, a boy who's known nothing but deprivation, naturally yearning for basic human necessities and pleasures. His life revolves around doing odd jobs for the Yakuza to pay off his deceased father's debt, and his only true goal is jam on bread, because that's the extent of what he can dream of. It's what he believes at this point to be the highest form of ecstasy, a testament to his extreme poverty. Then comes the safety needs. He achieves a level of safety after merging with Pochita, becoming the titular Chainsaw Man, which in turn grants him financial security via the public safety devil hunters, freeing him from his debt and poverty. Love and belonging, in my opinion, is primarily expressed through Denji's unique bond with power, as well as his longing for affection with Makima, stemming from a desire of closeness and acceptance. Then comes esteem, which is where it gets a wee bit techie, because these aren't quite fulfilled, which isn't a criticism, by the way. Denji has ambitions of being approved by Makima, equating her praise with his self-worth. It's probably this dependence on validation from others that prevents Denji from being anywhere near close to self-actualization, which is why signs of his pursuit for it are so limited, and I do have an issue with the utter lack of self-reflection or pursuit of personal goals, aside from his goal to touch some tits, which I'll talk about more in a second. However, here's where the defense of Denji's character using this hierarchy begins to unravel. While it's clear that his initial motivations align with the base of this pyramid, the progression through the subsequent stages is where things start to get a little bit murky. The argument that Denji is some nuanced portrayal of a character climbing this hierarchy falls short when you think about it for more than 2 minutes. I think that, quite frankly, people who use this argument are deluding themselves in regards to how clever the show is because they enjoy it so much, whether it be conscious or not. But maybe I'm being harsh. I just think that if Denji was truly progressing through Maslow's stages, we would have seen a more significant transformation in his character. Something more than just shifting from one basic need to another. For a character journeying towards self-actualization, we expect developments beyond just mere social connections or survival instincts. There should be a quest for personal growth, a pursuit of one's own identity and potential beyond external validation and superficial desires. When we examine Denji's actions and decisions, this kind of evolution is conspicuously absent. His move from survival to safety, or even from love to belonging, doesn't bring about a deeper understanding of himself or his place in the world. Yes, he does seek approval from Makima, but this is more about external validation rather than genuine expansion of self-esteem, so to speak. It's not really about Denji discovering his worth, it's more just about him trying to appear epic in someone else's eyes. Look, my point is that this aspect of self-actualization is notably missing in Denji's journey. True self-actualization involves introspection and an understanding of one's own abilities, and striving towards fulfilling that potential. Denji's character fundamentally just lacks this introspective depth. He remains, for the most part, a reactionary figure, driven by immediate needs and desires. His goals, like the infamous need to touch a woman's breast, tits, titties, whatever you want to call them, are emblematic of this superficiality. They're fleeting physical pleasures, not profound aspirations or reflections on inner growth. The show often reduces his relationships with other characters as mere silly, goofy antics, only hinting at a sense of belonging rather lazily, in my opinion. Like, sometimes he'll say a line like, "Oh, I just feel like there's something I'm missing in my life, like, I just feel like there's something more," but then they never actually act on those lines. He never actually acts on finding what else he needs in his life. It just comes across as a bit of lazy writing to try adding some much needed depth to the character. Like, they know the problem is there. Arguably his closest friend, Power, for example, when you really boil down their relationship, there isn't much there at all! It's very surface level, chaotic, and comical. It doesn't progress and evolve the way that normal relationships or friendships do, and I understand that these aren't normal characters, but that comes across as a bit of an excuse to me. Some might argue that Denji's lack of character development is intentional, reflecting the harsh reality of somebody trapped in a cycle of exploitation and poverty. That his character is a realistic portrayal of someone who can't afford self-actualization. Whilst I can definitely acknowledge that this perspective holds merit in Denji's initial state, not only does it sort of go against using Maslow's hierarchy in the first place, but it also doesn't even begin to fully justify the stagnation of his character throughout the series. Even in harsh realities, individuals grow, reflect, and change. Qualities that are just unseen in Denji's character throughout the entire show. Others might suggest that Denji's simplistic and straightforward desires are what make him relatable and endearing. While relatability is subjective, of course, a character's appeal doesn't negate the need for development. Engaging characters in any narrative, especially in a dark setting like Chainsaw Man, benefit from showing some degree of evolution in responses to their experiences. There's also the argument that Denji represents a departure from typical shonen protagonists who often exhibit significant growth and moral complexity. This deviation could be seen as refreshing, offering a protagonist who's unapologetically simplistic. However, deviation alone doesn't inherently make for compelling storytelling. The richness of a character comes not just from being different, but from how well their journey is crafted and presented. Imagine if Luke Skywalker, instead of evolving from a naive farm boy dreaming of adventure to a mature and skilled Jedi, remained largely unchanged throughout the saga. Imagine if he didn't struggle with his identity, his family legacy, or his morality. If Luke had maintained his initial simplistic view of the galaxy without the nuanced understanding he gains through his trials. Envision a version of Luke who never grapples with the revelation of his parentage, who doesn't experience the turmoil and temptation of the dark side, or the moral complexities of the Force. Consider how this lack of development would affect key moments in the saga, the iconic scene where Luke confronts Darth Vader and the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. What if, instead of the emotionally charged battle it was, fueled by Luke's internal struggle and growth, it was just another lightsaber duel, devoid of personal stakes? Or imagine if Luke's training with Yoda on Dagobah remained just a series of physical challenges, never touching the deeper lessons about patience, failure, and self-discovery. This is the crux of character development, the transformation from who the character is at the beginning of their story to who they become by its end. It's about the journey, the struggles, and the changes that occur within them. A Luke Skywalker who doesn't experience these transformations, whilst yes, would certainly be a deviation from traditional heroes' journeys, wouldn't just be less interesting, but be such a missed opportunity for a character who could embody the nuances of heroism, conflict, and personal growth. And that's not to say that all protagonists need to go through the same thing. Formulas and tropes like the hero's journey and the typical character arc can be played around with infinitely. I won't dwell too much because that could be a whole other video with how much you could do with it. But a great example of a character that displays a refreshing difference from the typical protagonist while still undergoing significant changes and introspection is Walter White from Breaking Bad. Walter starts as a high school chemistry teacher turned meth producer. Throughout the series, he undergoes undergoes a significant transformation. While his actions are often morally questionable, the show delves deeply into his character, exploring his motivations, internal conflicts, and the consequences of his choices. Walter's journey is complex and multi-layered, illustrating how a character can evolve while staying true to their core essence. I would have loved to see shades of something like that in Denji, something filled with personal dilemmas, moral quandaries, and a gradual shift in self-perception. Chainsaw Man could have offered a narrative that was both unconventional and deeply humanizing. It would not only have made Denji more interesting and relatable, but would also have set him apart from typical protagonists in a way that is both engaging and thought-provoking. Thus, using Maslow's hierarchy to defend Denji is, in essence, a stretch. It's not enough to simply check off the boxes of physiological needs and safety and call it character development. True development is about how these needs contribute to a character's larger worldview and psyche, and actions. So putting all of this aside, the core issue with Denji's character remains. He's bread with no butter. Bread no butter. He's dry. Completely dry. Despite the various stages of needs that he appears to fulfill, there's a lack of genuine change or depth. His character is like a stone skipping across the surface of a lake, touching upon different needs without ever truly diving in. The absence of this depth, this failure to explore his character beyond basic needs and desires, renders Denji less engaging, less memorable, and less successful as a protagonist. Now that doesn't mean that he can't be entertaining or likable, because he certainly can be. All I'm really trying to say is that I just don't understand all the hype surrounding him as a pillar of how to write a great character. An example of how an MC should be written. I don't think that he can be reasonably labeled as anything above fine. He seems like the kind of character who'd play comic relief in a slice of life, over a focal point in what's supposed to be some sort of a psychological thriller, I guess. He's not a complete failure, of course. His straightforward nature and unfiltered approach to life provide a certain charm for sure. His honesty and simplicity in a world filled with complex and often deceitful characters lends a sense of authenticity to his character. He says what he thinks and he acts on his desires without pretense, which, in its own way, is quite refreshing. Moreover, Denji's interactions with other characters, especially Pachita and Power, offer moments of genuine connection and warmth. These relationships, though flawed, bring out a more human side of Denji, showing his capability for loyalty and care. His bond with Pachita, in particular, adds an emotional depth to the character, highlighting his need for companionship and belonging. These semblances of layers in his persona, to me, mark a level of untapped potential in the character. Denji fundamentally remains largely static. His journey through Maslow's hierarchy is more implied than actualized, leaving us with a protagonist who, despite his extraordinary circumstances, feels extraordinarily unordinary. No, wait, extraordinary is a weird word. He seems boring. He seems really boring. The ascent up that psychological pyramid is simply meaningless when you don't have an actual character arc, or become wiser as a result of the experiences you've encountered throughout the season. To reduce my issues with this character down to one sentence, there's little to no change in the character that we see at the beginning of the season to the character that we see at the end of the season. And I hope I've made this video well enough to get that across clearly and help you understand why I think that. I'd also like to add that it was at this point in writing the script that I got massively spoiled at the ending of the manga, and by golly, to be fair, it sounds ridiculous and unexpected and crazy. But that being said, I haven't read the manga aside from the wee bits before the end of the first season, specifically for this video, because I wanted to see if the cigarette thing was in there and some other bits as well that I had to. By the way, the manga is a little bit better. It's paced better, it has... The show takes its time a bit more, so you're left with a bit more fluff and conversation, whereas the manga, because it's so much quicker, you don't really have time to dwell on how boring the characters are. It just sort of gets straight into the action, which is always the best part of the show. Anyway, I've gone way off topic now. All I'm saying is, for the manga readers who may or may not be watching this video through gritted teeth, I want to emphasize that I'm only talking about what I've seen. And all I've seen is 12 episodes of the anime. I did toy with the idea of reading the manga, but making a video on the manga in its entirety would essentially result in a 2 or 3 hour video, which I would actually love to do, thinking about it. But to be perfectly honest, I'm also aware of the risk to reward ratio. The reality of creating content like this is unpredictable, to say the least. If this video finds its audience and you guys show your support, then I'll absolutely commit to reading the manga and making a follow-up video. So this is my not so subtle nudge to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your interaction, whatever it may be, truly means the world to me. So much love, and I'll see you in a bit. Bye.